Hello and welcome to my history presentation on the topic of the international response to German aggression in the years of 1933 to 1940, and this time we'll be talking about the remilitarization of the Rhineland and its importance. So basically the research question and the overall surrounding question of this presentation will be, what was the international reaction to the remilitarization of the Rhineland? And in order to answer that adequately, here we have my table of contents. So first of all, I'll talk about what the Rhineland specifically is and its importance. Second of all, I'll talk about the I'll talk about the background of why the remilitarization of the Rhineland took place. Third of all, I'll talk about the treaties that were important to that response, to that international response, namely the Treaty of Versailles and the Treaty of Locarno. And then on the fourth place, I talk about the reasons for the remilitarization that accumulated because of the aforementioned background, importance, and the treaties. Then on the fifth place, I'll talk about the remilitarization process, 60 options for response that were possible at that time and alternatives, and thereafter the actual international response. And in the end, I'll have my sources listed, so if you're interested in a topic and want to perhaps hold a presentation of your own, you can use those, screenshot those, whatever. If you're interested in a topic, keep on watching, and I hope you enjoy. So yeah, let's start out with the Rhineland. On the right hand side you can see an older map of the Rhineland. So it's loosely defined as a region at the Rhine, the River Rhine, in Central Europe, specifically Western Germany. And it's full of valuable natural resources, which is why it was a very important industrial site also throughout the First World War. And it borders on France, Luxembourg, Belgium, and the Netherlands, as you can see on the right-hand side. Perhaps not as clearly, but you can imagine. So, the background that surrounded the aforementioned events was the Allied occupation from 1st of December 1918 to the 30th of June 1930. After the First World War, as a part of, the Treaty of Versailles, as we can see, which was signed on the 28th of June 1919, and thereafter the Treaty of Locarno, which was signed on the 1st of December 1925. And these were the backgrounds of the surrounding events. Now we have the treaties that I mentioned in the previous slide. First of all, the Treaty of Versailles, which basically contained the demilitarization, so the prohibition of the placement of German military in the Rhineland. And then we also have the Treaty of Locarno, which entailed the French withdrawal from the occupation of the Rhineland, also the division of borders in Europe, and the prohibition of Germany waging war. And both of those were heavily criticized within Germany after their signing. And for example, people like Hitler instrumentalized those as reasons for political actions. Now we have the remilitarization and the reasons. And first of all, it was the national morale and a propaganda victory. So the remilitarization, sort of the victory within old lost national territory, as you can say. Then we also have the demonstration of protest against the Treaty of Versailles. As I said before, the Treaty of Versailles led to great protest and criticism within Germany, or and then it was also a protest against the Franco-Soviet pact that was signed earlier. Now, the remilitarization process in and of itself started in the 7th of March 1936 with the invasion of Rhineland with 30,000 soldiers of the Wehrmacht. They ordered to remilitarize the demilitarized area, and they ordered to peacefully evacuate in case of opposition. So the plan was not to threat with armed forces, but rather evacuate in case they would be faced with ramped opposition. But the invasion was a success for Germany because there, in fact, was no opposition. Now, the options for response were the following. At first, we had the military response, which was to mobilize French and British forces to enforce the treaty. Then there would have been the economic response, which would be to reduce Germany's ability to conduct foreign exchange, which was somewhat within the powers of the Allies at the time. And then third of all, we had the optional response of appeasement, which was to enter negotiations with Germany as Hitler had offered. And what actually occurred was the following. Now, France had taken the role of a sort of caretaker government, and so could not consider war. The exaggerated German forces required a mobilization of the army, and there was little support for war within the country. And there was no action without Britain, so Britain had to be on France's side in case there would have been, to some extent, an attempt at an opposition. So negotiations included a possible non-aggression pact between the countries. On the other hand side, Britain had overstretched military commitments in the past, and the perception of Hitler's action was not as threatening as it might have been. The public opinion was in favor of peace and negotiating with Germany because of their war weariness after already witnessing a great war such as the First World War. And so, in the end, they acted on appeasement politics, which was a pattern seen throughout the rise of Hitler and the Third Reich, that the Allies, or Britain and France, stuck to appeasement politics in order to prevent a war. And this was the short presentation on the topic of the remilitarization of the Rhineland. Of course, there are a lot more resources and a lot more perspectives one could take that to, but this was only on the perspective of the international response. So I thank you for listening, if you even listened that long, and these are my sources for that. Thank you very much, and have a nice one.